At this moment, Putin is ending the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin elite can no longer restrain themselves. The goals of the so-called special military operation have failed. Ahead lies only a black hole for Moscow. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine are pushing Russia toward the abyss on the front lines. The Kremlin's best soldiers could not hold out. Our forces' victorious offensive, the massive cleanup has begun in epic fashion. Ukraine is preparing the strike of the century. Atakem's equivalent set on a course for Moscow. Shocking forecasts, Russian air defenses cannot cope with the Flamingo. Iskanders, get ready. From here, it is only a fiasco. Putin is handing Russia over to China, an unexpected turn of events. The Celestial Empire has declared Siberia its colony. And all of this is happening right now. Hello, I am Daryna Hutskalo, and we are beginning. At this moment, Russia is ending the war. Propaganda is already reading out prepared scripts. Pro-government Z-blogger Ilya Remeslo states that the goals of the so-called special military operation are unattainable. We must lay down our arms or Russia will face crisis and collapse. Moreover, questions are now being voiced out loud and without delay. Why is ending the military conflict beneficial for Russia right now?
The goals of the special military operation are being approached extremely slowly, and in some areas, they are even receding. This calls into question the possibility of achieving them. The announced plans for the operation are constantly changing, which does not help achieve results.
And here are the arguments that the Kremlin's mouthpieces are saying right to Putin's face. The war is devouring resources and people like a black hole. Tens of billions every day. Some have even counted 47 billion. The destruction is immense, and the heroes themselves are starting to get nervous and whine as the bills for all this arrive very quickly.
As long as the war continues, nothing will change. So we will be playing around for another 5 years until 2030 or 2031. Spending rather than preserving Russia's people and wealth without having a sensible plan. Everything we could demonstrate in military terms, we have already demonstrated. Do you agree? It is time to make a smart choice.
As we can see, there is a so-called panic in Moscow. Is this a sign that Putin will finally be forced to admit his failures? We are watching. At this moment, the front is boiling. Our forces are finally reaching the borders. Putin's soldiers cannot withstand the pressure. Near Pokrovsk, Ukrainian paratroopers incinerated an elite Russian unit.
According to available information, the 2nd Battalion of the 5th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, Oplot, was withdrawn from the combat zone for full restoration due to critical, irreversible losses.
However, that is not all. In the Pokrovsk direction, Defense Force units are conducting a cleanup in Hryshyn. Ukrainian defenders are methodically disrupting the enemy's offensive campaign. The Donetsk region is trembling. Our forces have advanced towards Sloviansk and Kostiantynivka. The enemy's plan for spectacular dominance and mega conquest has failed. Volodymyr Zelensky announced this triumphantly.
They were preparing this operation while we were taking counter-offensive steps, parallel actions. We wanted to prevent Russia from having the chance to attack us en masse on the battlefield. That's why we started the operation at the end of the year. And we regained control over 434 square kilometers.
But it's not just successes on the front. Alone, Ukraine is moving to test strikes with new FP-7 ballistic missiles against Russia. Our own long-range ATACMS analogs are eager to join the fight. This was reported by the co-founder of the defense company Firepoint, Dennis Stielerman.
There's already been a flight. Now we're moving on to testing on our dear neighbors.
And so we're talking about FP-7 ballistics with a strike range of up to 300 kilometers. Firepoint manufactures all parts independently from engines to the field controller. Only the warhead is ordered from contractors. Production begins even before codification. Moreover, Ukrainian engineers are preparing another mega beast for devastating missions, the FP-9 ballistic missile with a flight range of up to 850 kilometers. It will allow Ukraine to hit targets on Russian territory that were previously unreachable. It seems a season of nightmares is beginning for Russian air defense. The new Flamingo missiles break through defenses, that intercepting them is almost impossible. Military expert Serhiy Bratchuk confirmed that the Russian shield simply doesn't have time to react. And this is just the beginning. In the future, Flamingos could start hunting the most valuable targets, launchers of Russian Iskander missile systems. In other words, the weapon the Kremlin uses to scare others risks becoming a target itself. Urgently, the Kremlin seems to be making a bet from which there may be no return. Russia is entering China's shadow. This was stated on the Espresso broadcast by a Lithuanian diplomat.
There's already been a flight. Now we're moving on to testing on our dear neighbors.
Moreover, according to the diplomat, Americans already perceive Russian territory as a colony of China. The geopolitical earthquake has indeed begun.
In the future, in the minds of Americans, Russia will disappear. For them, these are already Chinese territories. For them, even Belarus is Chinese territory. The Russian Federation is handing its sovereignty over to China. It will be swallowed up.
And here are the first signs of a silent occupation by an ally. China is turning Siberia into its own resource base. This is reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
One of the key examples is the Zashulanskoye coal deposit in Transbaikalia. Its development is handled by a joint venture. Extraction is planned for 100 years, and the Russian authorities have granted the company tax breaks. Starting in 2027, it is planned to transport 5 million tons of coal annually to China, about 500 trucks per day.
Highways are being built for this, and jobs are going to Chinese specialists, not locals. The machine is in motion.
Even the symbol of Russia's natural wealth, Lake Baikal, is gradually becoming part of Chinese economic interests, highlighting how much Moscow has lost control over its own resource-rich regions.
Clearly, Xi Jinping has begun working according to his plan. Behind closed doors, the dictator decided the future fate of the Russian region. Putin is watching this and is already openly starting to panic, but he can't do anything about it. Right now, a choice piece of Russia is shifting onto China's scales. What will happen next, and will the head of the Kremlin dare to resist? We're watching.
Ukraine is preparing a powerful breakthrough in sky defense. Our forces are launching a new defense system that could seriously change the game for enemy drones. Volodymyr Zelensky announced a large-scale reinforcement of air defense. The focus is on domestic developments and interceptor drones to protect Ukrainian cities from attacks. Defense plants are already working almost without breaks. Conveyor belts are picking up speed. Partners, including Romania, are joining new security projects. What exactly is being prepared for the Ukrainian sky, and why talk about it now? The first details, next. It's the end for enemy Shaheds. Ukraine is launching a new weapon against kamikaze drones. Ukrainian interceptor drones have become a real global hit. More and more Gulf countries are interested in the Ukrainian anti-drone system. It's reported that Saudi Arabia is in talks with Ukraine for a major arms deal. And this is far from the first interested country.
Ukraine sent interceptor drones and a team of experts to Jordan to protect American military bases. Right now, no one in the world has more experience fighting Iranian drones than Kiev.
The Ukrainian Sting interceptor drone is one of the most effective tools for shooting down Shaheds. The percentage of its successful hits is almost 90%. But now, even more Russian Shaheds will be destroyed. A Ukrainian company has started mass-producing Air Baby interceptors, and their specific task is to catch up with and destroy the enemy drone.
The essential nature of the physical principles behind all interceptor drones is, for the most part, practically the same. A radar station typically guides the operator toward the drone that is being intercepted. The operator then establishes visual contact with the target, and after that, the interceptor drone proceeds to carry out its job.
In modern warfare with cheap Russian Shaheds, drones are becoming the main air defense as they have a great advantage.
The Americans can only produce 600 Patriot missiles per year for now. But interceptor drones, well, you can produce 60,000 of those. This is a really cheap, quite effective, and easily accessible solution. An adaptable means of counteraction that can be used in various situations.
And even countries with the best air defense systems eventually realize that this is not the best defense option.
60-65 missiles are produced by the largest Patriot manufacturer, America, per month. So it's clear that these stocks will be exhausted by any country. No matter how many missiles there are, it's not enough to fight Iranian Shaheds.
But air defense reform is just the beginning, as the Air Force is talking about creating something bigger, a Ukrainian Iron Dome.
At the moment, we have 4 clearly defined components that will work together to create our Ukrainian dome. It will differ from the Israeli one because our dome must be much larger. On our dome, let's say the Israeli dome is like a tiny little spot, purely in terms of size, So it's possible to fill a small spot with expensive missiles, but filling our dome with large missiles like Patriot or Iris-T is impossible.
But will this protective dome system actually end up being better than the Israeli one? And in what specific way exactly?
In military terms, it's called a unified integrated air defense system. So the essence of the idea is that all means of observation and detection of enemy targets are combined together with the means and methods of their interception, as well as the various techniques that are used in the process. To include all of this information into such an automated Delta system, roughly speaking, is quite a complex task. Obviously, our system, when fully implemented, will be significantly better and more advanced than the Israeli one, offering improved performance and greater reliability overall. I am sure of that.
The Ukrainian defense industry is developing at a record pace. It has long since stopped relying on the help of friendly countries and started betting on its own technologies for defense against Russian attacks. But to what extent will it be possible to create a strong dome even with such technologies?
When data is quickly transferred from detection means to destruction means the reaction time is reduced. Reaction time is reduced, which means the time for making a decision to destroy the target increases. And if you didn't destroy it, you get a second chance.
Ukraine's production capacity has increased nearly 50-fold and already meets more than half of the armed forces' weaponry needs. And it is quite logical that other countries are interested in cooperating with Ukraine.
Our experience in fighting Shaheds is unique. No one else has such experience. It's not just about having interceptor drones. It's about integrating this into the overall air defense system. It's about specific software. And the most important question between us is the experience that the military has, our dedicated military forces.
Kyiv is going even further. The president of Ukraine and the president of Romania agreed on joint drone production, which will be located on Romanian territory. Ukraine is creating a new sky defense. With an Iron Dome and Interceptor drones, enemy Shaheds will no longer pass. A new stage of Ukrainian air defense has already begun.
Urgent negotiations have reached a boiling point. The US and Russia are negotiating bypassing Ukraine. Meanwhile, American blood is on Russian hands. Trump has again forgotten about this blow to the gut. Kyiv is harshly bringing Washington back to reality. A sharp turn, the course has been changed. The US is slamming its fist on the table and pinning Russia to the wall. Will the Americans have the strength to make the Russians bow their heads? More on this next.
Closed-door negotiations between Washington and Moscow took place in Florida. Rumor has it, the main topics of discussion were Iran and Ukraine. However, both sides were unwilling to disclose the results or the agenda of the meeting. Reportedly, the parties discussed a range of issues and agreed to maintain further contact. The talks were constructive, as reported by U.S. Special Representative Steve Witkoff, confirming his recent thesis that the delegations have approached a decisive moment in the negotiations.
I am a logical person. President Trump is successful in settling various matters in these specific circumstances, and he says so. It took longer than he thought. But we see signs that both sides are already tired, and I hope we are at the beginning of a turning point.
It is known that the Russian side at the talks was led by Putin's special envoy, Kirill Dmitriev. According to experts, one of the topics for discussion could have been Russian aid to Iran. By providing satellite intelligence, Moscow adjusted Tehran's missile strikes on US military bases. And in the US, this information was received extremely negatively.
And I really want Congress not just to talk, but to discuss one single question. If United States citizens start dying at military bases in the region, and if there is a proven role of Russia here, then these negotiations are definitely worth it. Wait for Dmitriev to continue them. This is an internal agenda. Do you understand? It's not for us to say.
Experts also don't rule out that negotiations were held regarding Ukraine. Ahead of the trilateral meeting of delegations from Kiev, Washington, and Moscow, the US may have found new leverage against the Russians. Given the war in the Middle East and the upcoming elections for the United States House of Representatives, the American side is highly invested in the success of the talks.
Trump wants this, and Trump wants it soon because he needs this result and a victory. Regime change in Iran, yes, which is also no easy task, and the end of the war, well, not even the end of the war, but a ceasefire. In Ukraine, that's what he needs before the midterm elections. The Republicans could lose their majority, and they likely will lose their majority in Congress right now, and that, well, for any president, makes the job significantly harder.
Meanwhile, a new trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the US, and the Russian Federation has been confirmed. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, it will take place as early as next week. The head of state reported that the talks were planned for Tuesday or Wednesday in Turkey. However, they were postponed at the initiative of the American side due to the war in the Middle East.
The only upside from all these negotiation tracks, there are actually two of them. As I said at the beginning, Ukraine is showing that it is ready for diplomacy and that it's ready to support all diplomatic efforts so that Russia's war against Ukraine ends. And the second aspect is that we are trying to maintain the support of the United States of America. Another plus from the talks is that we finally managed to unblock the humanitarian aspect. A prisoner exchange is underway.
No one is willing to predict today what results the new meeting will bring. According to analysts, much now depends on the success of the US and Israeli operations in the Middle East, which would allow for talks with Russia from a position of strength.
Urgent. Orban's cheap trick didn't work. Kyiv didn't become a hostage of the Moscow regime, but struck back so hard that even the Kremlin felt it. Putin's friend was left speechless by this. Zelensky has pinned Moscow's ally to the mat. Europe has issued a decisive order. The elections in Hungary have failed. Orban is being ousted a month before the vote. Putin is tearing his hair out in his bunker. Did Ukraine manage to make Hungary turn against the Russian Federation? Shocking. We'll discuss this in more detail coming up next. Hungary continues to pressure Ukraine and is once again making demands. This time, Hungary reacted to Russia's claims of an alleged Ukrainian attack on a compressor station linked to TurkStream and called it an attack on Hungary's sovereignty. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó stated that TurkStream guarantees gas supplies to Hungary, and without it, the country's gas supply would simply be impossible.
Ukraine has now attacked the TurkStream infrastructure in Russia, which provides gas supplies to Hungary. Without TurkStream, Hungary simply won't be able to safely receive gas from a geographical and physical standpoint. Ukraine's blocking of transit through the Druzhba pipeline and this strike on TurkStream are serious attacks against our sovereignty.
However, Szijjártó did not specify where or when this infrastructure was attacked. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin himself has repeatedly claimed that Ukraine allegedly wants to attack TurkStream.
We are currently talking about a possible explosion occurring in our gas systems situated along the bottom of the Black Sea. This is what is known as the so-called TurkStream and Blue Stream pipelines. They just can't seem to settle down. They really do not know what steps they should take or what actions they can possibly consider in order to destroy or undermine this ongoing peace process. With an attempt at reaching a settlement, specifically through diplomatic means and negotiations, they are left uncertain and unsure about how to proceed. They're doing everything they can to carry out some kind of provocation.
And all this is happening against the backdrop of the upcoming elections in Hungary, scheduled for April 12th.
In these elections, Orban has bet everything on the theme of foreign policy, and specifically on the theme of demonizing Ukraine. Why did he do that? Well, because he has nothing to boast about in terms of domestic policy. A huge level of corruption, constant corruption, and other scandals involving him and members of his party, deteriorating relations with Europe and in general with Hungary's neighbors. All of this is hardly a result that can be presented to the voter to get re-elected.
Just the other day, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban claimed that the Ukrainian authorities are allegedly actively interfering in the Hungarian elections. According to him, the Ukrainian side cares about the outcome of the elections in Hungary and therefore decided to participate in the election campaign. According to the Hungarian Prime Minister, active participants in these elections will be not only opposition Hungarian politicians, but also the Ukrainian authorities and the President of Ukraine.
We stand on the ground of common sense, so this should not surprise us. The President of Ukraine and Ukraine will be active participants in these elections, and we must defeat them as well. We know that they are financing our opponents. We know how it happens.
In other words, they are constantly demonizing Ukraine as part of the election campaign. Most likely with the participation of Russian political consultants, as well as specialists from the Russian GRU. Orban has bet on foreign policy, the demonization of Ukraine, and the demonization of Europe. He has done this before, but previously, for example, Soros was among his main enemies. Now, instead of Soros, it is Ukraine.
However, amid all these provocations, statements, and actions by Hungary, Orban's Kremlin strategists miscalculated what cards Ukraine actually holds. Ukraine's financial resources turned out to be less depleted than politicians had feared. And the country can hold out at least until the beginning of May. 4 sources familiar with Kiev's finances told Politico about this. Previously, there were fears that the Ukrainian authorities, facing a budget deficit of at least $50 billion this year, would start running out of funds by late March. However, the situation changed after the International Monetary Fund approved an $8.1 billion loan for Ukraine last month. Of this amount, $1.5 billion was paid out immediately. In mid-December, European Union leaders agreed on a €90 billion financial support package for Ukraine to help fund its defense against Russian troops. However, Hungary recently blocked this initiative, accusing Ukraine of deliberately delaying repairs to the damaged Druzhba oil pipeline for political reasons, to influence elections that could potentially remove the current Prime Minister Viktor Orban from power. Kyiv strongly rejected these allegations, stating that the pipeline is currently far too damaged to transport the vital Russian oil supplies to Hungary following a drone attack in late January. As a result, Hungary has been unable to receive its usual oil shipments. Most likely, Orban's Kremlin strategists expected that if the first $90 billion loan tranche didn't arrive by early April, the Ukrainian government would have to cut spending due to the deficit. Such a situation would mean that Kyiv is interested in finding ways to unblock the oil pipeline in order to unblock the loan. And that would mean trying to negotiate with Orban, who would thus win the political war, he himself declared. Indeed, the Hungarian Prime Minister himself was counting on Kyiv running out of resources just before the elections in Hungary. Now, if the Druzhba repairs do not happen by April 12th, Orban has effectively lost. This could be a negative factor for the Hungarian Prime Minister's ratings, as the voter will not get the promised victory over Ukraine. As of today, the Hungarian opposition party TISA maintains its lead ahead of the elections.
Finally, an opposition leader has emerged in Hungary, the leader of the opposition forces, Peter Magyar. Orban tried his best to demonize him. It is not working out very well so far.
As Reuters reports, a month before the elections in Hungary, Peter Magyar's TISA is ahead of Fidesz, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, by 14 percentage points among decided voters. In January, the gap was 16 points. TISA received 53% support from decided voters. The figure hasn't changed since January, while Fidesz was supported by 39%.
One way or another, there will be many questions for him in the future regarding his activities, corruption, and ties to Russia, what he received for effectively trading the status of a leader of a European Union member state. So there will be many questions for him. And I sincerely hope that in about a month, Hungary will have a new government with which Ukraine can perhaps try to build more adequate, more normal relations.
That's all for our broadcast. We continue right now to follow the most current events to tell you about them first. Don't forget to subscribe. See you.